Welcome to the Clear Admit MBA Admissions Podcast. I'm Graham Richmond, and this is your WireTaps for Monday, February 14th, 2022. I'm joined by Alex Brown from Cornwall, England. Alex, happy Valentine's Day.
I was going to start with that too. How about that?
So is this celebrated in the UK?
Is it celebrated in the UK? If I don't celebrate it, I'm in a lot of trouble.
So, okay, I know that we're recording this in advance, but do you have something already in the works or no?
Oh, yeah, I went to Tesco's yesterday, got some chocolate, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Good,
yeah.
Good. That's funny. So what else is going on, though? I know last week we thought it would be kind of a quiet week in between the kind of Harvard interviews, and then I know there's, some other schools issuing this coming week, but we had some news last week, right?
Yeah. Booth dropped their interview invites all in one go, and Booth is they never really tell you when this is going to happen, but you can suspect when it's going to happen, and last week I think was a pretty good bet that it would happen, and it did happen. So lots of activity surrounding the outcomes of obviously Harvard and Ross, now Booth. But we're waiting again on Valentine's Day today for Wharton to sort of drop its interview invites. And yeah, we're pretty much, I'd say, at the peak of interview invite season at this point, Graham.
Yeah, and that actually is a good segue because I did want to mention that we have a lot of stuff on the website that's totally free and available and on this podcast as well. So we've done articles and podcast episodes about the 5 most common MBA interview questions that you might receive. We also did one, and I think these are both just maybe with you, Alex, and Jeanette, our colleague that used to host the podcast from time to time. You did one about the 7 hardest MBA interview questions and like how to answer them. So those are good episodes. And I believe there are articles that accompany them on the website. We've got articles about knowing your interviewer, like what, is it a student? Is it an alum? Is it an admissions officer? And what does that mean in terms of how you prepare? We even, I think, have a piece on how to say thank you after an interview has happened and all the kind of anything you'd really want to know. So just check out, the admissions tips on our website. There are a handful of podcast episodes about interviewing as well, including specific episodes we've recorded about interviewing at Wharton for the team-based discussion and interviewing at HBS, where they have a, kind of a non-blind, fairly challenging interview process. But yeah, Alex, any thoughts on interview prep since we're talking about it?
Yeah, I mean, just to expand on the resources that we have, Graham, obviously we have the Interview Archive, which is the largest MBA admissions interview archive on the internet. It probably covers 20-25 programs with interview questions over the last sort of several years now, and as well as interview guides. So there's no reason you should go into an interview without feeling that you have the resources and access to fully prepare. And the more you prepare, the more relaxed you can be in the interview. I mean, I'm a huge believer in over preparation allows you to enjoy the experience.
Yeah, and to be yourself. And we hear, I know that people are getting sick of it.
Yeah.
On these events that we do, people talk, you hear the admissions officers saying it time and time again, please just be your authentic self. We hear that like over and over again. And I think it's a lot easier to be your authentic self if you've like prepared a lot and are ready to kind of answer the questions and can do so in a way that's not stilted. The worst thing on earth is when you get on an interview with someone and you can tell that they've got like some kind of a cheat sheet off screen, since most of these interviews are happening, via video, and that they're kind of reading from something or they're just not comfortable.
Yeah.
And so, I would argue you need to be able to go into the interview without a cheat sheet handy and know the stuff cold so that you can be you and satisfy, both the admissions officers need to feel like you're being authentic and your own need to make sure you're saying the right stuff. So that's, good luck to everyone who is prepping right now. We, Alex and I know what that's like. We've been on both sides of the table there between the two of us. So good luck to everyone there. Over on the website, Alex, we did run a Real Humans piece on ESADE, which is a school in Barcelona, a really good business school with a number of key strengths. One of them is marketing, comes to mind right away for me. And so check that out if you're interested in their program. We profiled 3 students, learned all about their journey. And I feel like the 3 students arrived in Barcelona from, I want to say, South Korea, Lebanon, and the USA. So 3 really different journeys to get to ESADE, but pretty cool piece that we ran. And then the other thing, Alex.
Yeah, hold on, I got to call you on that, Graham. You're bragging, aren't you? Because you've actually read this piece.
I read it. Yeah, I did. Well,
Nice.
I mean, I try to read the stuff that we that we put up on the site. But yeah, no, it was a good piece. And the other thing is that we have another employment report. We continue to run these out, and we're also very close to running some amazing content that the team has been preparing. I know Alex and I have been sort of previewing this for weeks, but it is forthcoming. We've been doing a lot of really interesting stuff with career placement. But this week we've got Berkeley. They published their employment report for the class of 2021. And Alex, the average salary for graduates was 143. Berkeley tripped me up a little bit because they had the median listed at 149, and normally we see average, so average, if we're doing apples to apples, it's 143. Signing bonus, the average was $33,000. 90% of their students had offers for work within 3 months of graduation. And let's see, Alex, do you want me to do the industry percentages or the regional placement information first?
Throw both of them out there. What's the biggest region and what's the biggest industry?
Okay, so tech leads the way for industries. 34% of the graduates of that class who were looking for work went into tech. The next biggest was consulting with 28%. And then there's a pretty steep drop off. You get to finance, 12%, healthcare, 7%, CPG, 6%. So those are the kind of industries. And then on the regional placements, a whopping 73% of graduates who were looking for work landed on the West Coast. The next biggest category looks to be the Southwest with 6% of graduates. And remember, that includes Texas. So that's that market. And then the Northeast is next with 5%. And you've got, Midwest 3%, Mid-Atlantic similar 3%, and then the South is 1%. So I did add up those numbers and realized they don't add up to 100, and that's because 9% of the class did head off to jobs overseas. So that's kind of the way to think of it. Although, when you look at this, you say, wow, 73% staying on the West Coast, 9% go international. Those are the two biggest buckets, actually. So your chances of, coming back to the East Coast are, they're pretty small. It's like a 5%, group that's doing that. Now, that could be self-selection too, though. So we never know what's driving that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure some of it is self-selection, but it is super interesting. And as you said, Graham, we've been doing a lot of in-depth analysis on these employment reports in preparation of releasing a lot of material, probably in the next 2 to 3 weeks, regarding this. But one nugget of insight that I learned in the last couple of days of reviewing some of this material is if I'm about to launch a brand new business school, which coast am I going to build this business school, Graham? West Coast or East Coast?
I think the West Coast, because it's underserved if you look at the number of programs out there versus jobs.
It's amazing. It's amazing. The number of folks that go to top tier programs on the West Coast versus the number that go to work on the West Coast post their MBA program. The discrepancy is really interesting. I thought these numbers from Berkeley were very interesting. Obviously, that 73% West Coast doesn't surprise me at all based on what we learned through that sort of little experiment that I just talked about. Also, tech at 34%. Interesting to compare that with Stanford, Graham, the other obviously big program, or not big in terms of class size, but top tier program in that region. They're at 29%. How do you compare those two data points, Graham?
Yeah, it is interesting because, you would think, Stanford's going to have the largest placement in tech. But when we went and looked at the numbers before we came on air, we saw that actually, and I think some of our listeners remember this, but, finance was the biggest industry for Stanford at 33% of placements. But again, I think that's because there's a lot of folks going into venture capital and private equity out of Stanford. And so that kind of boosts that finance number. And then tech's at 29%. So not so far off from Berkeley's number. Berkeley's at 34%, right? So yeah, so just interesting to see that. And then remember, there are a lot of people at Stanford who are not looking for jobs because they're going off to do their own thing. And so that some of that stuff may be tech, may not. The school may not have full information on all that at the time that they're doing these reports. So
yeah, that sort of the notion that they're going off into entrepreneurship, you can make an assumption that a good chunk of that entrepreneurship is going to be tech related.
Yeah.
But probably fits into a different bucket.
Yeah.
It is really interesting. And again, I don't want to keep sort of teasing out this content we're going to produce in the next 2 to 3 weeks. But when we look at Stanford and a couple of other schools at the very top, their placement into buy-side finance versus sell-side is what really allows them to stand out, I think.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah. So stay tuned, everybody. We ran a piece on round 3 applications and like reasons to apply in round 3. So check that out on the website if you're contemplating a round 3 application or a late round application to business school. This actually may not.
On that note, Graham, sorry to keep interrupting you.
No.
Should folks apply in round 3? What are we hearing? What is your sense of the app pools from rounds 1 and 2?
The volume's down this year. And so I think, business schools would love to see quality candidates showing up in round 3 that they could plug some holes in their class with. I think, they'll probably dip into their round 1 wait lists quite substantially as they make decisions. So that bodes well for anyone that's tuning in here who's already on a wait list. But I do think there are going to be some opportunities in round 3. And, again, there's no harm in applying. And if you don't get in, you can always apply in, early rounds next year. So, yeah, this is not a bad year. The COVID bump has sort of run its course, it seems. And now that the job market's so hot, MBA application volume has been off a bit. So I think there's opportunities this year to be in this final round.
I would even argue, Graham, that COVID bump last year, or whenever you put it, encouraged candidates that would have applied this year ordinarily to apply last year. So what it's done, rather than the COVID bump getting necessarily more candidates into the pipeline, it's shifted when candidates apply. And if that is the case, then yes, numbers this year will be down a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. There's probably been some just shifting of the demand instead of increasing of the demand. Yeah, we'll see how it all plays out, but check that article out on the site. The other thing I wanted to mention on the podcast, we did a kind of a separate episode where I sat down with Chris Healy, who is from Alliance Manchester Business School in the UK, and he and I just did a primer on MBA program types. So we wanted to just sort of like go to, kind of step 1, like what kinds of MBA programs are there, from part-time, full-time, or executive versus, working professional versus full-time, kind of young professional. We've got, we kind of tried to really break it all down and help people who are maybe just getting started on their journey, try to determine what kind of program is right. We talked about different, delivery methods from hybrid, online, all that kind of stuff too. And Chris, I don't know if you know him, but he's been working in this space for more than 15 years and knows a lot about business schools and program types. And so he was a good guest to have on to help me go through that stuff. So you can tune into that. It's up on the feed here. And yeah, I think that's about it. We're finally done with some of those events that we were doing. And I know there's going to be some more online events coming up in April or May. We'll do some, early bird type events for candidates. And we've got a whole amazing group of schools signed up already to help join us for these events. But stay tuned. We'll get more word on that. Alex, there have been no reviews, so I got nothing in the mailbag, although I did notice that we now have an official rating on Spotify the other day.
Wow.
Yeah, the way that it was set up was that you could rate the show, but until we got a certain number of people chiming in, I guess, they weren't going to display. Because obviously, once you and I had voted, a couple of times 5 stars, they're not going to let that slip through, right? So they have to wait for a bunch of real people to come in and vote. And yeah, apparently, I can't remember what it said, but something like 30 or 40 people had voted, and I think we have 5 stars. So that was kind of cool. Yeah.
No, that's excellent. I wouldn't even know how to rate.
No, I know. I
got to look at that.
Yeah, I don't use it. Obviously, they've been in the news for other reasons lately, so we'll probably steer clear of all that controversy. But yeah, we do have a rating there now. So I appreciate everyone who's tuning in on Spotify who managed to rate our show. And yeah, just cool. But we do always appreciate hearing from you. So please send us your emails at info@clearadmit.com. Use the subject line wiretaps, and Alex or myself will get back to you. We just love to hear your stories. Any questions you have, send them our way.
Or send a voice memo and we'll play it, whatever it is.
That's right. Yeah, we did that last week. So
as long as it's not related to COVID information, because we don't need a warning label on our podcast.
Oh, right. Yes, that's right. So I guess that's all the housekeeping stuff. So should we get into the candidates that you've picked out, Alex?
Let's kick on.
All right. So this is Wiretaps candidate number 1. So this candidate is looking to apply in 2023 to start in 24. So a real early bird candidate. And they've got 5 schools on their target list. And those schools are Harvard, MIT, NYU Stern, Washington Foster, and UT Austin McCombs. And they've been working in manufacturing, but they'd like to shift into consulting or tech. And some of the companies they have on their list for target post-MBA are Carney, Bain, BCG, Deloitte, and McKinsey. They have a 770 on the GMAT. Alex, you'll recall we used to write GBGM, what was it? No, yeah, GBGMAT next to those in the file when we used to hand read all these files, which stood for Great Big GMAT. So 770 on the GMAT, 3.58 GPA, and 3 years of work experience at this point. They're located in Houston, Texas, and post-MBA, they list Seattle and Denver as target landing points. So interesting there. They wanted to know if we had any advice for them as to how they might improve their profile before they apply in the fall of 23. They offered some additional details. They mentioned they have a BS in chemical engineering and econ. I guess they did a year as a product management intern and then 3 years of professional experience as a chemical engineer in the manufacturing sector. They also do some extracurricular work. They're a mentor for underprivileged high schoolers, but they don't have a well-defined leadership role there. So I think they're just looking for advice, like how can they set themselves up for success with these target schools when they do apply down the road?
Yeah, no, I mean, this is a great candidate, quite honestly, in terms of a lot of potential here. Like you say, great GMAT, GPA is fine. You know, chemical engineering is a tough major, so a 358 with a 770, I mean, that sort of really allows them to stand out, I think. And, you know, they have 3 years of experience. It looks like they're planning to apply in a couple more years, so we'll debate if that makes sense in a minute, I suppose. But certainly their big question, Graham, is how can they show and demonstrate leadership? They're in a very technical role, working at the firm that they're working at now for 3 years. And they do stuff in their extracurriculars. They mentor underprivileged high schoolers, which I think is absolutely fantastic, but not with a defined sort of leadership role. So I'll just toss it back to you, Graham, and put you on the spot a little bit. What are some of the things that this candidate can do to articulate leadership and leadership aptitude?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because I don't have a good sense of, the environment in which they're working, but I would say, I would start at work. That would be the first place I would look. Are there any additional kind of initiatives they could pursue? Sometimes you see someone in a technical role, but then they end up doing something that's maybe not even directly related to their day-to-day job, but in the office. So organizing an event or some kind of a group of colleagues to focus on, I don't know, women in business or whatever it is, right? There could be different, or maybe it's like, hey, get a bunch of people at my company together to participate in the work that this candidate's been doing with underprivileged high schoolers. So there could be ways to demonstrate that you're able to organize people in the office to do things outside the office. It doesn't have to be leading a project. Although with that said, if they've been there for a few years and, presumably maybe the company, I don't know if they have clients or, customers, or I would hope that there's a way for them to get some sort of client-facing or customer-facing experience or, just to the extent that they can continue to grow in their role. And I don't know if they're managing anyone, but that would be another thing. Obviously, taking on a direct report or two, or even managing interns can be a nice way to show some leadership. So those are a few things that come into my mind just off the top of my head.
Yeah, no, I think those are really good suggestions, quite honestly. And even just from a project management standpoint, working on a project that has certain deliverables that have impact in the organization, in the company, as well as for a client. I mean, there are ways to sort of weave that into a sort of leadership narrative, I think. But this does seem to be this candidate's sort of, I'm not saying Achilles heel, but they think it's their Achilles heel. The question is, how do they frame this stuff? Because as we talked about before we came on air, Graham, does this candidate need to wait 2 more years before they apply? Or should they apply this upcoming season, take a shot, apply only to top schools, and if they're not successful, wait that additional year?
Yeah, because I actually think that these numbers that they have, the 770 and let's call it a 3.6, I mean, they're really excellent numbers. And, they have ample work experience with the 3 years they've had to date. I actually think this person could get into some of these schools on their list if they were to apply this coming fall. And so now, do they have the leadership chops to make it into, say, HBS? Hard to say. But I think some of that just could really be up to what they do over the next few months even.
Yeah.
And so I would really encourage this person to think about moving up the timeline a bit. I did want to talk about one other thing, which is they talk about wanting to do operations or strategy consulting in Seattle or Denver. I just wanted to understand, why those two cities. And if it's just personal reasons, fine. But if there is something specific, like maybe they're really interested in, I know, out of Denver, there's a lot of kind of outdoors related industry happening, or out of Seattle, obviously you have Amazon and some interesting operations challenges, and there's a port. And there's a lot of things that could be happening in that region. But I would love to know more about what are they looking to do? Because that's the other thing that's potentially missing here is I get it, it's a natural move to go from engineering into kind of consulting or something, and even operations makes a lot of sense. But it'd be cool if there was somewhat of a theme here. Maybe, I don't know, maybe they love the outdoors, or is there something driving this that would give their candidacy just a little more flavor? Because I do think there is this fear of, engineer, great marks and things, but is there more, are there more dimensions to this candidate? And so I would work on that as well, because I think it was the former admissions director before Chad Losey was this woman named Deirdre Leopold at Harvard. And she once told me, they sometimes ask people, what are you reading, or, in an interview. And, people often trot out the usual nonfiction kind of business stuff. And she was like, I was always, kind of surprised when someone said something like, oh, I just finished reading The Twelfth Night by Shakespeare. It's because she was always on the lookout for people who were kind of multi-dimensional and had, different interests. So I would encourage this person to think about that. Maybe they're an outdoors nut. They love hiking, skiing, whatever it might be that would make sense for Seattle and Denver. Or maybe it's just a spouse or, kind of family connections. I don't know. But anyway, they could do more to round out their candidacy, but I still think they probably should just apply this coming season.
What are you reading, Graham?
Right now, what is it called? I'm reading a totally trashy novel called The Luckiest Girl Alive. It's about a woman who went to private school in the Philadelphia suburbs and moves to New York City and tries to make it with the high rollers in New York. It's actually really funny.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So, yeah. What about you? You're reading something that's nonfiction, I'm certain of it.
I actually just finished a book written by a friend of mine about a racehorse, Run with a Mighty Heart. Absolutely fantastic. Her first book, so I really enjoyed that. Now I'm reading a really sort of dense 600-page book that's related to all this sort of fascism and various other things that are going wrong with the world. And it's sort of, looking back at sort of, discriminated populations and stuff. So I try to mix it up a little bit. Right now I'm having a bit of a headache trying to get through about, a couple of 100 pages a week just to get the book read so I better understand this stuff.
Yeah. Makes sense. Yeah. I did, when you were talking about this candidate and chemical engineering, I did come up with an idea for a t-shirt for you. It should just say something like, chemical engineers are wicked smart, because that's what you often would say when we talk about that.
They're certainly wickedly smarter than I am, that's for sure.
So, but I think this person, I really do think this candidate could get into any number of schools on their list, including HBS, with the right sort of strategy.
And we suggest they target Wharton and Kellogg as a couple of other programs to sort of beef up their M7.
Yeah.
And especially if they decide to apply a year earlier. Because as someone applying a year earlier, only apply to the very best. If you're not successful, you come back as a reapplicant.
Yeah, agreed. And I do think it's smart they have Foster on the list.
Yeah.
If they potentially want to be in Seattle, I can't think of a better place to go, right? So that's good to have on there. But yeah, I wish this person the best of luck. Thank them for sharing their post. But let's move on and talk about WireTaps candidate number 2. So this is another ApplyWire entry that we've received. This person's actually applied and is, in process. And so they applied to Columbia, Duke, NYU, and Vanderbilt. And they've been working in asset management prior to, applying to business school here. And they want to get into investment banking or maybe VC or even private equity after business school. They have a 690 on the GMAT, a 3.7 GPA, and they've been working for 9 years. They're in New York, presumably New York City. And they did share some additional details. Essentially, they applied, I guess, in round 2, or it may have been even earlier. And they mentioned that, maybe it was round 1, because they mentioned they're on the wait list at Duke after interviewing there. And they have completed an interview with Vanderbilt. Owen, still awaiting decision there. And they have not heard anything yet from Stern or, what was the other one? Columbia. So that's where they stand now. I don't know, what are your thoughts? Like, obviously, they've got this waitlist at Duke, they're in process at Vanderbilt, and sort of crickets for Columbia and Stern. But what do you make of this candidacy? I mean, they've got 9 years of experience, 690, 3.7. What's your take?
Yeah, I mean, getting on the waitlist in round 1's not ideal at Duke. But as we talked about before, in the preamble for this show, maybe being on the wait list from round 1's not such a bad thing.
Not this year, yeah.
Given the app volumes are going to be down now. They didn't know that necessarily in round 1 in terms of the drop-off in round 2, if that's where the app volume has dropped off. So I would anticipate programs like Duke will go quite deep into their wait list. Why is that? Because it's a bit of a pyramid scheme, right? Or it's a bit of a pyramid. If a very top program goes to their wait list, then the programs in the next tier down have to go to their wait list because they're drawing candidates from those programs, et cetera, et cetera. So really, for this candidate, they've not heard from Stern and Columbia. I'm not saying that they're only going to hear bad news from this point on, but maybe that's not a particularly good thing. But Duke is something to really focus on. What is their waitlist strategy? With this 690 GMAT, if they think that they can improve that, even if it's only by 10 points, I would really encourage them to retake the GMAT. Why is that? It does two things. One is potentially they can improve the score, and that sort of elevates their overall profile. But secondly, it shows to Duke, to Fuqua, that they're trying to do all the right things to get off the wait list, one of which might be improving that test score because it's going to be below Duke's average. But also a couple of other sort of data points that we had from their ApplyWire entry, that 9 years of experience, they really need to show again that they're going to make the most of the MBA experience. So oftentimes older candidates are perceived to be candidates that only show up to the classes and don't fully engage. So they want to show that they'll fully engage and make sure that their goals, as stated right now, investment banking, venture capital, private equity, make sure that their goals are tight and reasonable for the schools that they're targeting. But if I was this candidate, I would hope that they're going to get an admission option at Owen. I would really, really push the Duke Fuqua waitlist, and possibly they get some options at Stern and Columbia. But to me, Duke, let's go for that.
Yeah, and I guess, as far as the GMAT's concerned, I think a lot of it comes down to, have they taken it 5 times already? And the 690 was kind of the final effort and the best result they've got? Or is this they took it once, in which case they risk falling into that, this is an older candidate who's a little bit out of touch with their academic chops and, would really benefit from going back and taking it a second time, or, even just prepping and redoing the test. So, I think it would go a long way. Like if they ended up, crossing the 700 mark, they probably could convert that Duke wait list. I think they also need to do some other things, though. I think, write the love letters or whatever you want to call it to sort of point out to Duke, that they're really, they're going to matriculate if accepted, that they know, that maybe they've been doing some additional research, talking with current students or alumni and figuring out that career path. I would focus more on investment banking and maybe other finance related roles than say PE or VC, because I think those are a little bit more far and few between coming out of some of the MBA programs. I think it's challenging. So in any event, there are things they could do. We have a whole guide that we've written about waitlist strategy. I would definitely encourage this person to go full court press because, I think Fuqua is an excellent program. And if this person could convert there, that would be phenomenal. I expect that they'll get an offer at Owen. And, hard to say with Columbia and NYU Stern. I mean, the fact that they're waitlisted at Fuqua, which you could argue is, maybe similarly ranked to Stern or, in a notch below CBS or something. I mean, that means that they could get bad news potentially from these New York schools. So it's hard to know. And that's why I agree with you. Go for it on the wait list at Duke for now and sit tight and see what happens with Vanderbilt.
Totalitarianism. That's the name of the book I'm reading. Yes.
All right. Excellent. So I think enough said on this candidate, but I appreciate them sharing their kind of profile and current situation. And, again, there are things they can do. Read our waitlist guide, or, we have a lot of tips on the website too about it, but I think there are things they can do to up their chances. And I think this is a good year to have been waitlisted early on in the cycle, because as you said, Duke's going to definitely go to that list. So
I would think so. Best of luck to them, for sure.
yeah, absolutely. All right, let's move on and talk about WireTaps candidate number 3. So this third entry for the week is a DecisionWire entry. The candidate, as usual, is undecided. And wait till you hear this dilemma, Alex. They have been, they applied to Berkeley, Columbia, Harvard, NYU, Stanford, and Yale. And they ended up with offers at Berkeley, where they have a full ride, $175,000 scholarship. They got into Columbia with $160K. NYU gave them $50,000. Stanford, they were accepted as well, but without any aid. As you remember, Stanford uses need-based aid, and they've indicated that they're not getting any because they have a lot of savings. So, and then Yale admitted them without a scholarship. So they basically ran the table and got money, the only exception being Harvard did not accept them. So pretty good results there. They want to work as an entrepreneur after business school. Their GRE was a 328, GPA a 3.5. They're located currently in Los Angeles, and they're really debating, they say, at this point, between Stanford, Columbia with 160K, and then Haas with a total free ride at 175K. So it comes down to that. They're currently a mechanical engineer. They really want to do entrepreneurship with maybe a fallback as kind of a tech PM or strategy person if that doesn't work. They love California. They also love New York. They said they're leaning strongly towards Stanford, but they're frightened by the price tag. So where do we start, Alex? What do you make of this dilemma? Is it a dilemma at all?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think it's a classic dilemma. You get a load of money from one school and get no money from a school in a tier or two above. I think Elliot would articulate, what would you regret most, giving up the Stanford opportunity or giving up the 170K or whatever the price difference is? He used that sort of as a way to debate this on another discussion. And I think it's a difficult challenge. I mean, obviously, this candidate sort of talked a little bit about why they're not eligible for financial aid at Stanford, because they've done a very good job of saving money over the years, which is unfortunate for them. So that's a little bit of a paradox there, I think. But it's difficult. But what I've just done, Graham, as you were talking, is I went to DecisionWire. I selected Haas and Stanford as admits in the filters. So all the DecisionWire entries that we have of those cross admits, some of them are still, obviously they're undecided posts, but others have selected, their enrolled school. What percent do you think of those are going to Haas?
I think it's small. I think most people will go to Stanford.
Yeah, Stanford or Harvard, because obviously if they're cross-admitted at Stanford and Haas, they might also have gotten admit at Harvard. So, yeah, it's Stanford over Harvard, none for Haas. And we're talking maybe 20. Well, it's probably not 20 final decisions, but probably 15 or so final decisions. So hunting around on DecisionWire, looking for folks that have made this similar choice might be a way to sort of break the tie. But it is a dilemma, because if you want to be an entrepreneur like this person, I think you're weighing up, well, that 170K or whatever it is could give you a lot more freedom to become an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
The other side of that coin is that Stanford network and the access Stanford provides might well be the best place to become the entrepreneur you want to become.
Yeah.
So to me, those are the two considerations. And, 10, 20 years' time, I'm sorry, but I'd have to say Stanford's the choice.
Yeah, it's an interesting dilemma. And I actually want to mention that someone left a comment on this post that said, I hope Alex and Graham cover this on their podcast, because I imagine a lot of other candidates often decide between full ride at Haas versus sticker price at GSB. So, and there are a bunch of other factors that come into this discussion around, wow, what are the merits of need-based aid versus merit-based aid, right? So that's a whole other, we could probably do an entire podcast on that. I think for me, what I would really want to ask this candidate to try to separate out is, what's it like? There's a difference between the money. Like if we're making this decision purely based on money, then you go to Haas, you put the 175K or, this big retirement savings that this person already has, and you invest it, and you say, you know what, that time value money, I'm going to save that money and I'll go to Haas. It's a fantastic MBA program. If money is the main kind of factor, then, I think someone could very much make this kind of compelling case that why not just go where it's free, But we know that we're talking about your life, and you're going to spend 2 years in an MBA program, and, you might try to start your own company. And so there are all these other factors that have to come in. And I think, I do look back to my own experiences. I had scholarship dollars at some schools that were lower down on the list. I didn't get, I got like a tiny bit of aid at Wharton. And, I haven't looked back and said, oh man, if I had, saved that money, where would I be? It's never even been a question. So I just would encourage this person to think about it. And I think you said something very funny before we came on air, Alex, which was you were kind of like, well, if this person's done such a great job saving, well, what have they been saving it for? Can you think of anything better to spend it on? I mean, this is a pretty good endeavor to spend money on. And I have to think that they're going to land on their feet out of Stanford, even if they are a little bit in debt or have to spend some of that savings. It's not an obvious call, but I think that it is worth debating.
Yeah.
It just comes down to their comfort level. Everyone has a different comfort level with finances. So, just
one final thing that I just throw out there, and this might sound a little elitist. I don't want it to come across as being elitist, but oftentimes lost in these conversations is simply the quality of people you're going to be surrounded by or with or whatever over the next couple of years. And at Stanford, I'm sorry, but there is going to be a slight difference between that quality at Stanford than there would be at Haas. Even though Haas is an outstanding program, Stanford is the very elite. Stanford, Harvard, right at the very elite level. So the type of folk you're going to be hanging out with for 2 years is absolutely going to be amazing at Stanford.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is something to, and that's why I think it was Elliot put a post up on the website saying, go to the admitted students events online or otherwise, and get to know these communities and see what you think.
Yeah,
because they're not exactly the same, and yeah, I think it's worth doing the investigation here. But I do want to wish this person the best of luck with their startup and with whatever they end up doing after business school. And again, no wrong answer here. I know we didn't really talk about the CBS option, but I just felt like, I don't know, it just seemed like from what they're saying, all signs point to one of the two California options.
Yeah.
I mean, that was my take on this. So we'll kind of leave it there. Again, I love these posts. It's fun to debate them. There's never a right answer. I don't want anyone to think that we're saying you have to go to one or the other, but it is really fun to debate these champagne problems, as we would call them. But Alex, we've reached the end of another week's Wiretaps. Appreciate you picking out all these candidates to discuss, and we'll do it all over again next week if you're willing.
Very good. Best of luck, everyone. Stay safe.